Oh, I forgot to set up the show open. I could do it. I'll try it now. Hold on. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we've got winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings all over the place tonight. The Weather Service watches and warnings map looks like a Christmas tree, and we're going to light it up tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And we, of course, appreciate those of you who support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast by shopping our referral link on Amazon. You can uh, do it very easily. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board, or it will be momentarily. It's also on the description to this podcast, and it's very simple. Use that as your go-to link to get to Amazon, search and do your shopping, get your stuff. Amazon sends us a little coin for sending you there. Doesn't cost you one extra penny. The only effort you have to put into this is to click on that link and shop on Amazon. And we appreciate very much those of you who have done so in support of the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, because it keeps, as long as we can do that, don't have to run extra ads, and we can run the whole show without interruption. So we got some snow tonight, and actually it's been snowing pretty much all day long down in Virginia. I got some pictures that Dave Tolleris took that I'm going to show if you. So I'll do it right now. And they're kind of different sort of pictures, Joe. They're not the sort of pictures you might expect. So
Really?
I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that there is and it's a meteorological fact. This does exist. The Dave Tolleris. There we go. Come on, the Dave Tolleris snow hole. And if you could see that area there, that is where Dave Tolleris lives. And it's notorious. He's gotten into this thing many times in the past, and it has appeared once again. This is all snow. There's Richmond. So from Richmond on north, it's all snow all the way up. But no, poor Dave sitting in the snow hole. And yeah, he got a little bit of snow, as you can see by his, I think, is that a swimming pool? Or a pond or a puddle or something? I don't know. Hard to say. But our dear Dave did at least see some snow, although they saw a lot more around them. And of course, the issue with this one is it's only getting so far north before it cuts off and slides to the east. You may not see very much by you.
Right. We are, where I am, we're at the just to the north of the Westchester County line in Putnam County. And the thought is from here, Joe, that anybody who's located south of Interstate 287, and that also includes, the Mario Cuomo Tappan Zee Bridge, you're south of there, you might pick up an inch or two of the white stuff by daybreak tomorrow morning. North of there, it might be more like less than an inch to just a coating. And to the north of me is Interstate 84. That's a west to east thoroughfare, and if you go north of there, you may not see a flake. It's going to be that kind of a situation where if you want snow this go around, you're going to have to go south, not north, to get it.
And we've got a very busy weather pattern going forward. We've got another weather system coming in tomorrow night. A couple of days ago, that looked like we could maybe get a little bit of a front end thump of a few inches, but now it looks to me like that probably won't be the case.
Yeah, it looks like right now there will be snow for everyone initially when the snow begins moving in about this time tomorrow evening, a little shortly thereafter. But then a gradual warming trend during the overnight tomorrow night. Temperatures, especially after midnight tomorrow night, may very well go up, and in many places above freezing. So snow to sleet or ice, and then when many wake up on Thursday morning, it looks like it's going to be just flat out rain. And, whatever falls in the evening hours will be all mushy and slushy. I wouldn't say it exactly is going to get washed away, but it will make maybe for a tricky driving situation on Thursday morning. But it's very doubtful that I, for example, will need to use my snowblower. And it looks like the next storm that has been promoted for, it seems like eons, everybody's been talking about, oh, we've got a series of storms, a parade of storms, and there's one coming over the president weekend. and even that looks like to be chiefly rain. In fact, if anything, the storm for Saturday night and Sunday looks like a soaking rain for
Yeah.
much of the
And
area.
Saturday, the whole setup's kind of weird because there's a cold front that comes through on Saturday, and actually, some of the models are showing, maybe even getting a few inches of snow from the frontal passage, and then the front stalls to the south with another wave that develops on it, and that runs up to, nearby as a deepening low, and we'll get the wind suddenly turns south. So, we could maybe Saturday will be the day that we put down like a little bit of a front end thing, and then it turns to a windswept, so a big rain, a soaking rain, as you said. It'll just all wash away, and then right after that all goes by, it looks like it's going to turn very cold next week.
Yeah, it looks like temperatures on Monday and Tuesday will not get out of the 20s with nighttime lows, at least in the lower Hudson Valley, probably dropping into the single digits in many places. That is going to be cold, and that could set the stage for the next weather headache, which may come later in the week. Not Tuesday, not Wednesday, but maybe a week from this Thursday. That may pose a most interesting scenario, but so far in advance. I mean, like we're talking about 8, 9 days ahead out, and you never know that what's going to happen 8 or 9 days from now in terms
No,
of the track and in terms of the storm strength. And we were talking last night about the fact that this system for late next week may actually involve a low, an upper level low that will strengthen and cut off, not like the fast flow that we've been seeing with all of these waves of low pressure passing us by. So it looks like we could have an interesting scenario for later next week. But until then, unfortunately, if you're a snow lover, it looks like either you're going to miss out completely or
oh,
almost
you're
miss out.
getting some, you're getting nickeled and dimed.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
we have to work just as hard for the nickel and dime ones as we do for the big ones. But yeah, I mean, you're getting nickel and dime, which is at least something. So you're going to set up your radars and get ready to go, and I'll just say hi to everybody on the chat board tonight, and those of you lurking in the background here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We are here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday when there's a storm to deal with. We'll see what happens over tomorrow and Thursday if we decide to add a show going into the weekend. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn your notifications on, and this way you don't miss us. If you like the show, hit the like button, so because Joe can ring the bell at 100 likes and blow the horn at 200. And also, we are within, I think, I need 60 more to get to 15,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. So if you're new and you like the show, hit the like button and then hit the subscribe button, and then you definitely will not miss us. So have at it. Go. I'll monitor the observations in the meantime.
I just sent you a request. The sharing feature is not turned on.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm usually ahead of these things. I don't know why. Oh, yes, I just got the request.
Yes.
I have accepted the request.
Oh, well,
So
thank you.
so I request that you share the radars. There you go.
And I'm doing that right now. And here
Okay.
we go. This is New York City, Upton radar, which is actually located nowhere near New York City, but it's out about 100 miles to the east. But still, you can see, as we had just noted, that the next threat of any precipitation is going to be coming up from the south, and it looks like it's trying to do that. I do notice, Joe, that winter weather advisories were put up for a good part of Long Island, and I'm not sure whether or not what you're seeing right now is reaching the ground
There
across
are
Nassau.
I did get a few reports from some people in Nassau County that in Merrick and in Levittown that it has started snowing there very lightly.
Okay, so if you happen to live in those areas in Nassau or Western Suffolk, when you wake up tomorrow morning, there's a fair chance you're going to get at least an inch, maybe 2 or 3 inches. Again, this is the storm that is actually close to the outer banks of North Carolina right now and is taking a trek east northeastward just far enough north to allow the northern edge or the northern periphery of the snow associated with it to get up into a portion of the tri-state area. But as I noted at the onset of the show, if you are located, well, if you're south of Interstate 287 in Westchester County, you'll get maybe an inch or two. If you're north of 287, probably less than an inch. And if you're up near the I-84 corridor, there's a fair chance that all that snow that you're seeing right now on the radar that's crossing through north central New Jersey and into a part of Long Island and New York City, that northern edge may never get as far north as the 84 corridor, and you just may end up with nothing on the ground tomorrow morning. So again, the further south you go, the better your odds of seeing precipitation, seeing snow. So this is New York. Let's go on down to the Philadelphia area.
And while you set up for that, I just want to mention moderate snow right now at Atlantic City in 31. We have a north wind at 3. Wildwood is borderline moderate at 32. Mount Holly, 3/4 at 29 there. Wrightstown, 30 with light snow. Also, Tom's River, light snow and 31. Light snow at Allaire, which is further north, and a temperature of 30. Philadelphia is 31. They're at 1 mile with light snow, and I believe down in Delaware, we've got 1 mile in light snow in Stevensville. I'm sorry, that's not in Delaware. Delaware, Georgetown, light snow 3/4. Dover, light snow, no visibility given. Wilmington, 3/4 and light snow. Patuxent, which was heavy snow for hours this afternoon, is now light. And Salisbury, light snow. They also had heavy snow for several hours, and they're down to light snow at a temperature of 31. Moderate at Baltimore and Washington, D.C., which was moderate for several hours. Now back to, well, light snow, but it's still 3/4 mile visibility. So it's close to moderate there. I'm sorry, Joe, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, it kind of rings along the lines of, I'm thinking back to, way back actually, to the blizzard of '78, watching Alan Casper reporting from outside the CBS Broadcast Center on 57th Street as that storm was getting underway and pointing out to everybody that at that moment in time, Pomona, New Jersey, which is just inland from Atlantic City, picked up 3 inches of snow in 1 hour, and trying to stress how that was heavy, heavy snow, and it was moving on a northerly course. This particular snow, which is bringing moderate snow to, as Joe mentioned, Atlantic City now and portions of Maryland, Patuxent River, and Delaware, and Washington, Baltimore area. This snow is not moving straight north. It's moving more or less on a path more to the east-northeast. And again, that means that we here in the New York area will probably miss out on the heaviest snow. And the heavy snow on this particular radar out of Philadelphia and Wrightstown is where you're seeing the green colors. You could see that green enveloping much of South Jersey. You could see as it's heading north, however, it kind of fizzles out or diminishes some, probably because it's running into some dry air, and that's eating away at the snow and the intensity. But as you can see, in extreme southern New Jersey and across portions of Delaware and on into Washington and Baltimore, which is located here. In fact, if I go to the radar in the Washington, D.C. area, this is Washington, Sterling, Virginia, you could see again lots of green and also flashes of yellow and orange, indicating probably moderate to heavy snow that's occurring in those areas. And that's where the real dumping is taking place in terms of heavy snowfall, is right there. And again, you can see how the movement, it's not going south to north or even southwest to northeast. It's moving more in an east-northeasterly fashion, which again means that most of the lion's share of the really significant snow is probably going to pass just underneath the immediate tri-state metropolitan area, which is why places like Washington and Baltimore, all the way up to about Philadelphia, will pick up at least a half a foot of the white stuff, if not more. And meanwhile, here in New York, again, it depends on where you are. This is one of those weird situations where probably if you live in the lower end of Staten Island, you might end up picking up like, a quickie 3, 4, 5 inches of snow. Meanwhile, if you live up in the Bronx, it might be more like only an inch or two. It's that kind of a storm, and it's that kind of a snowfall this go around for the immediate tri-state area. Let's go a little bit further to the south and west now. Let's go to we'll go to well, this is Washington again. This is Sterling, Virginia. Let's go a little further south than that, down to Roanoke, Floyd County, Virginia, and you can see down there the precipitation is falling at a much heavier clip. There's a lot more in terms of yellows and oranges as opposed to further north. The green would be the steady light or light to moderate snow. The orange or the yellows would be moderate to even heavy snow. I would venture to guess where you see the yellows, you'd probably be seeing snow coming down at the rate of at least a half or three-quarters of an inch to maybe more than an inch per hour. And that again is where the real accumulation is going to be. I mentioned the fact that the storm apparently is centered near the outer banks of North Carolina. So why don't we just look there? You can see that there's kind of a hole in the radar. There's a lot of activity going on just offshore, just off the outer banks here, and that's probably more rain than anything else. And meanwhile, to the north and west, where it's a bit colder, it's probably snow over the North Carolina Virginia border. And again, there's this corridor, this wide area here where the activity is just scattered. Not much of anything is falling in this zone right here. Further south, we go down to well, why don't we go to where Joe is, or close to where Joe is in
Why don't you
northern.
go where Joe? It barely got out of the 30s here today.
Well, there's
It's been a miserable day here. Cloudy, some on and off rain, and a raw northeast wind. What am I right now? I just finally got above 40. I'm 41. I'm at the high of the day.
okay. Well, you can see northern Georgia. Joe has what appears to be light to moderate precipitation. You're pretty much mostly in the green with a few flashes of yellow or orange here, which means that there's some spots that are getting some spurts of moderate to even heavy rainfall. I presume that that's moving in your direction. It looks like from southwest to northeast. So you may be getting into an even heavier dose of precipitation during the next few hours.
All
Anywhere
right.
else you'd like to go, or
No, I think we're good. I think we're pretty good here.
okay?
I'm going to go to the watches and warnings map because it looks like a Christmas tree, and it is just covered with winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings and flash flood watches and all sorts of things. Uh, what you see in upstate New York and New England and in Pennsylvania is in northern Pennsylvania is not related to the system that's there now. This is ahead of the system for Wednesday night, and they have winter weather advisories up. It's going to be for some snow. It's going to be for some freezing rain and sleet, and also advisories up in Massachusetts and northern Connecticut. And that again is also for Wednesday night. For tonight, we've got winter weather advisories for Long Island. We have winter weather advisories in New Jersey for Monmouth County and Mercer County southward, and winter storm warnings in the southernmost New Jersey counties, winter storm warnings in Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, also ice storm warnings, and this is probably ahead of Wednesday night for the mountains of northwestern Virginia and western Virginia. I'm sorry, eastern West Virginia. We have winter weather advisories for tonight for the southeastern part of Pennsylvania and the south central counties of Pennsylvania. Uh, Areas like cities like York and Lancaster, for example, all under a winter weather advisory. Meanwhile, the Wednesday night system is affecting the central plains to the Great Lakes with heavy wintry precipitation. Winter storm warnings for central and northern Kansas, southern Nebraska. Much of if you cut Iowa in a diagonal, the southeastern half of it, the half of Missouri under a winter storm warning, advisories to the south, western Illinois, advisories continuing for the rest of Illinois, southern Wisconsin, warnings along the the Lake Michigan shoreline. On the other side, we have in Michigan, south and central Michigan, winter weather advisories with winter storm watches up for eastern Michigan, advisories for northwestern Ohio and northern Indiana. Also, winter weather advisories extending down into Oklahoma and into northwest Texas and eastern Colorado. We've got, I think those are winter storm watches up this through central Utah. Let me double check that color first because it's like a weird color. It is a winter storm watch. Okay, good. Winter
They're
storm
running.
watch is
They're running
there.
out of colors.
Yeah. It's just that it doesn't really match. If you look at the color in Utah, look at the color in northern Maine. To me, they don't look the same, and yet they're both winter storm watches. Winter storm warnings in the Sierra Nevadas and in some of the mountains in Northern California. We've got flash flood watches on the west side of those mountains, flash flood watches up and down the entire coast of California, pretty much. So they're busy there with their own round of winter weather and some heavy rains that are getting down all the way down um, to San Diego, where they got flash flood watches up there. And here's the satellite. By the way, when you look at the system here in the east, I mean, this is really strictly overrunning with the flat wave. We don't have some developing low into a major storm. There is a low that's going to develop offshore and then move out to the east. But really, this is what happens when you have a strong westerly flow and cold air from a cold high to the north, creating just overrunning. So if you're in the right spot, you you can get a lot of moisture with it, and though not have much development as far as a low is concerned. And the cloud line is pushed up to about Albany, but the precip line is struggling to move, as far north as it can before it gets shoved out to the east. And there's more energy back in the Rockies, and that's going to be setting off the follow-up system for tomorrow into Thursday morning. And meanwhile, you can see there's a ton of cloud cover and moisture coming into the west, into California, and that's why they have what they have. Here's a wide view of the radar tonight. I'm going to give it a quick refresh. And you're starting to get some of the greens over Long Island here, into New Jersey. Looks like from about 195 south, it's snowing rather steadily, as Joe pointed out when he did the local radars. Then you see the real heavy stuff in Delaware, and now moving into southernmost New Jersey. And yeah, there's a nice patch. It almost looks convective here on the Maryland side of the Delmarva Peninsula. I looked to find any public information statements from the Weather Service to see if there were any snow amounts yet, and they haven't posted any yet. So I'd be very curious to see what some of the numbers that come out of Virginia and Maryland and Delaware out of this, and even back into West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky. There's precipitation there going on. We've got rain, uh, some heavy rains moving into western Georgia, getting close to me, and northwest Georgia, and also in the northern half of Alabama, northern and central Mississippi, back down into Louisiana. And here's the first round of moisture coming into California with that system that's offshore. WPC, the next 7 days, think back to January when we had very little in the way of precipitation for a good chunk of the country, really. It was a fairly quiet month with just a few exceptions here and there. But it's a little different now, and it's loaded in the east and in the Gulf states. We've got this area in the deep south and in the Ohio, in the Tennessee and the lower Ohio Valley, where we're talking about anywhere from 4 to 7 inches of rain possible over the next 7 days. In fact, they got that 7 inch area, 6 7 inch area there. I'm in it in northeast Georgia and in southwestern North Carolina. Also, some heavy mountain snows in the Rockies. Some areas of 1.5 to 2 inches of melted. So we're talking about a couple of feet of snow from the central Rockies up to the northern Rockies and up and down the west coast. A lot of rain along the immediate west coast uh, from southern Oregon, actually all the way up to Washington State, and then going all the way down to San Diego. We're talking about 2 inches or more of rain over the next 7 days. And this is a place where really this winter has been dry up until about a week or so ago for much of the western part of the U.S. So here's our system for tonight. It goes out. It's Joe. Again, it's very unusual to have a follow-up system so close by. The first one is all overrunning. The second one, though, is with a trough and a shortwave, and this is lifting up to our west. This is actually the first storm system all winter that has taken a track up the west side of the Appalachians.
Right, we haven't seen too many of those. Normally, the ones that take a track up to the west bring initially a shot of snow, but then the warm air advection ahead of the advancing system pulls up enough warm air to change it over to sleet, ice, and eventually rain. And that's pretty much what we're going to see with the next system, the one coming for tomorrow night, and the system that's coming after that on this upcoming weekend. By the way, Joe, you had mentioned more than a few times that this winter, the pattern seems to resemble or remind you of the winter of 1994. And I would like to gently jog your memory. I know that you remember this. It was on this day in 1994, it was a Friday, that we had 12.8 inches of snowfall during a snowstorm that began shortly before daybreak and continued right on into Friday evening. And this was just one of two storms. This was just 2 days after a storm that hit New York City with 9 inches of snow and was New York's, up until then, the biggest snowfall that we had seen since 1983, which also occurred on this date, February 11th. And like today, in 1994, it was not today, but like in 1994, the 83 storm was also on a Friday. And in fact, speaking of the 83 storm, how many of you remember this? I know Joe doesn't. Well, he remembers it, but he wasn't here in New York. I was. We had on this day in 1983 a monster snowstorm known as the Great Megalopolitan Snowstorm that struck from Washington and Baltimore to Boston with anywhere from 1 to 2 feet of snow. I think Philadelphia broke their all-time snowfall record with that storm. It was a monster storm, as I said. Moved in during the afternoon in New York, continued until the wee hours of the morning, the next morning, which was a Saturday. The storm really cranked up. I remember this between 8 and 11 p.m. I was doing WABC radio at that time in my career, and I was doing it with Alan B. Combs. Some of you may remember Alan. He has gone to a different sector of the universe now. He passed away several years ago. But between 8 and 11 p.m., we had 6 inches of snowfall in New York City. This was February 11th, 1983, when the last flakes fell. 17.6 inches of snow had piled up, making this the New York's biggest snowfall since 1978, when 17.7 inches fell on February 5 to 7, the blizzard of 78, and the sixth biggest snowfall in Central Park history. Now this 83 storm only ranks 13th. But again, on this day in 83, a tremendous snowfall, 17.6 inches, and then in 1994, 12.8 inches of snow fell just 2 days after a 9-inch snowstorm fell in New York. Joe, they don't make winters like they used to.
No, well, that's as we measure them lately. I just went back. That the '94 one was a special. That was a special week for me because you got to remember at that time it's not like today. A lot of the stations. That was still a time where very few stations had um, uh, really had meteorologists that sort of invested their day in forecasting. So and it was also before maps were and guidance were as widespread and acceptable. So I remember it for two reasons. This is the first setup for Tuesday. High pressure to the north, small frontal boundary, pretty much like what we're seeing now from the Carolinas back into the lower Mississippi Valley, and a little wave, nothing special about it, just a little wave that developed and moved along. This was the first one. It brought 9 inches, as you said, for New York City, brought about a foot to where I was on Long Island. So that was on Tuesday. And the snow had just wound up Wednesday morning early. No one had anything in the forecast for Friday. And No, those were the days where the Foose only went out, I think, 48 hours. And I remember on the noon show getting, not the noon show, maybe it was the morning show, the last the 9 o'clock show, getting the Foose, and everybody thought, the anchors tossed to me about, "Oh, okay, the snow's no over. Now we have great weather for the rest of the week." And I came on that day and said, "We're in big trouble for Friday, that we're going to wind up maybe perhaps having a repeat performance of what we just had, if not worse."
I
And no
remember you.
one,
I
and
remember you saying that.
I remember going off the air and having one of the executive producers, a couple of them coming to me and said, "How come you're just like when you get that person that says to you, well, how come so and so is saying this and you're saying that?"
Right.
I
Right.
got the producers were coming to me and were like, "You are the only, no one is saying this. You are the only one that's saying it." And all I remember, I forgot who it was I said it to, but I remember saying to this person, "Watch." Okay. That's all I said. Watch. And sure enough, on that Friday, again, that same frontal boundary was still there. Big high to the north. I mean, we're talking temperatures that were in the single digits down to New York City ahead of this. And then here comes the next wave. And there it was. You see the low off the North Carolina coast with the inverted trough up to offshore Southeast Virginia. I mean, you're looking at temperatures that were in, you know, this was at 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday, two above zero. There's a -2 there, just north of New York City. In Southeast Virginia, I guess that's Richmond. It was 22. I mean, we're talking really cold air here, and it just, again, nothing really special. Nice 10, 16 low. I mean, it really wasn't anything special, but it was a beautiful overrunning setup. We not only got a foot of snow out of this, but I remember that night when the low was going by, Joe, freezing rain and a temperature of 12. I had a foot of snow on the ground and it had turned to freezing rain and it was 12 degrees. I have never seen freezing rain at 12 degrees before, and I have not ever seen it since.
Well, I remember that storm so very, very well. And in fact, I also remember that the next day, Saturday, I was filling in for the late great Norm Devoskin at News 12 Long Island, and Bill Corbell. Bill, of course, for many years on Rambling with Gambling on WOR, and he was no longer on the radio, and he was just getting his feet wet doing the weather on television and learning the ropes on TV. And he came in to watch, me on News 12 Long Island. I wasn't exactly a veteran on television, but I had a little bit more experience than he did, and we both were barely able to make it because even the parking lot at News 12 Long Island had not been plowed out completely, and so we had trouble finding parking spaces for our cars. And I remember that this came on the heels of again a 12-inch snowstorm, which was preceded 2 days earlier by a 9-inch snowstorm. It was an incredible stretch of weather that we had during that period in 1994.
Yeah, and by the way, that was the beginning of the stretch because we had storm after storm right into mid-March. It was one after another, all fairly similar. Mostly nickel and dimes, but a few bigger ones in the mix too. Gary Crosby, thank you for hitting super chat tonight. By the way, Ari Mack, thank you for hitting super chat, and David Fuller, thank you for hitting super chat tonight. Most appreciated. All right, let's get to where we're going the next week to 10 days because there's just a lot going on. And here, this is the system for what tomorrow night. And again, because the low is going so far to the west. I mean, basically the low is going to Cleveland. This is about the first time, again, all winter that we've seen the model show something go to the west, and it actually is going to go to the west. So the front end just doesn't really get going until you get up into northern New England. We'll get a little bit of snow at the start. It's going to be spotty and patchy late tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. It can pretty much go quickly to rain. There might be some freezing rain in 84 north, maybe in New York State. in Connecticut, and snow further north. And then by Thursday morning, this thing is already pulling away. The rain in the southeast is going to be moving offshore. The front passes through Florida. We get a little bit of drying. Now, this is a weird setup for Saturday because you got, I don't even know how to quite analyze this because the low is way south down in northern Mississippi, but there's some kind of weird looking warm front that sets up. And the GFS and to some extent the other models have an area of snow that comes in during the day on Saturday and actually throws down a few inches before that front sort of buckles back northward, and you can see where the low, tracks up the west side of the Appalachians and then center jumps to the Jersey coast sometime during Sunday. So it has all the ingredients for a big rain and probably a sizable snowfall for western and northern New York, western Pennsylvania, and eventually for northern and even central New England, because once the low gets offshore, it deepens in the Gulf of Maine. So you're probably going to see rain changing to snow across New England and upstate New York. We probably won't get much on the backside, if anything. But behind it is very cold air, and that's going to settle into next week. Now, this is where it gets interesting, where you got big cold high, good solid cold flow from Canada. Another round of wind, Joe. You're going to like that. You've been talking about the fact that we've been getting, quite a bit of wind this winter, and it looks like Sunday night and Monday the gradient's tight. But there's energy coming in from the west that's going to try to go to, at least on this run, it takes a track pretty far south. And while it keeps it offshore, I think rather than focus on the specifics 186 and 192 hours out, focus on the fact that we do have a pattern that could be favorable for a storm later next week. And we've been saying for the last week now that the upper air is setting up in such a way that we might be able to pull something off with this setup. So for now, the GFS does what it does. The European actually does the same. And also, interestingly enough, Joe, the models, all three models, the European, the GFS, and the Canadian, all are kind of on the same page with this idea for later next week.
Right. And, we were talking about 1994 and how the big cold high was in place and these waves of low pressure. But, a lot of people look for the storm. They say, "Oh, we got a big storm. Get a big. We can look up for that." You don't. If you want snow, folks, if you want a significant snowfall, what you really should be looking for is the high, the big high. If the high is big, and especially is associated with cold air, you don't need a big storm. All you need to do is to have the proper placement of the cold high and have even a minor wave of low pressure go underneath it.
Well, that's what's happening tonight. That's what's happening tonight in Virginia, in Maryland, in Delaware, right, and in southern New Jersey.
Right. All you need is a relatively minor. I mean, an inverted trough could in the right setup and with the right movement could give you a quickie 3 to 6 inches. Now, what we're talking about for next week, Wednesday, Thursday, is a big high. Actually, the core of the high is going to stay back over the northern plains, stretch out, and there's going to be like a cell of high pressure that's going to be over the mid-Atlantic and northeastern states, and that's going to be moving offshore. Now, normally you see that and you say, hey, that means we're going to get into warm air advection, southwesterly or southerly winds behind the storm moving offshore, and we'll get, even if we get a storm, it'll go from snow to rain. But you've got the main center of the high pressure cell, because of the block that's setting up, still back over the plain states and the Great Lakes. It just happens to stretch out like a piece of Turkish taffy, and now you've got, as Joe pointed out, this system trying to come up out of the Gulf. Am I going to get in trouble if I call it the Gulf of Mexico now? I don't give a damn. It's going to come up out of the Gulf and go underneath that big cold high. And again, if we can get everything in place, if we get the perfect setup, as this wave moves underneath that cold high, there you have it. There you have the potential for a really significant non-transitional snowfall. When I say non-transitional, I'm not saying it's going to change to sleet or ice or even plain rain. You want it flat out snow from start to finish, and you also want it slow. The building high and the ridge in the upper atmosphere will take that upper storm coming out of the area to the south of us and slow it down. All of these other storms we've had this winter have sped on by. They've come in and 6 hours later they're out. If you want a really good snowfall, you want one that's going to last 8, 10, 12 hours. This one coming later next week has that potential. And I want to underscore that word potential. And in fact, Joe, I'm going to share with you and everybody from what we have here on CPC. This is for the system we're talking about. This is interesting. I did it like a double take for a moment looking at this. And what we have here is the risk for heavy snow. This broad area that you see from the lower lakes, enveloping much of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, all the way down to northeasternmost Texas and up and across into the Tennessee Valley, this whole area that includes or encompasses places like Kentucky and Indiana, most of Illinois, Ohio, and the southern and western sections of Pennsylvania and most of Virginia and West Virginia, this whole area, slight risk of heavy snow from the 19th through the 20th. That's next Wednesday and Thursday of next week. But it doesn't end there, because right here is the Northeast. Here's New York City, New England, northeastern Pennsylvania, and the slight risk for heavy snow here for the 20th and the 21st. That would be for next Thursday into next Friday. So it's the same system, but as you can see, it's, whoops, I'm sorry. Let me just move back a ways. It's moving. I mean, it's not zooming along. It's moving along a leisurely path here that's going to encompass this zone over the 19th and 20th, and then 20th and 21st, New England. Now, again, we get that big cold high, which is centered here, and it stretches out across the northeastern United States and mid-Atlantic, and you got that storm coming up out of the Gulf and moving underneath it, slowly but surely. If everything falls into place, maybe, just maybe, we just might have that snow that a lot of you have been waiting for. I'm not talking about the 2 to 4 or the 3 to 5 or the 4 to 6. You want the 6 to 10 or the 8 to 12? This possibly could do it. Again, it's about 7 or 8 days out. A lot of things may change. A lot of things have to fall into place, but at least you've got something to hang your hat on right now for the middle and latter part of next week.
Leon of Lindenhurst hit super chat. Thank you, Leon. Most appreciated. And Tom Contino is just fell off his chair because you're bullish, surprisingly bullish on this.
Tom Contino probably has always looked. He said Joe Rayo fired up tonight. I want to tell you something. That's interesting that Tom puts that up there, because I, over the years, now it wasn't the same when I was starting in this business. Like you, Joe, I said, in fact, I was almost like Gastineau on the New York Sack Exchange, the New York Jets. Whenever he sacked a quarterback, he would jump up and down and go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Whenever I saw even the slightest chance of a snowfall in my younger days, that's how I was. And over the years, I became more and more conservative. So much so that people look at me now and they say, oh, Rayo, he hates snow. Rayo, he always goes lower than anybody else. That happened to me this past weekend. I was getting, after the show on Saturday, Joe, people pinging me on Messenger and saying, how come you're only going 2 to 4 or 4 to 6? And I saw this guy on TV going 8 or 9 inches. Why are you always so low? But the interesting thing about that is that when I get fired up, and Tom just mentioned that on the chat board, hey, even Rayo's fired up. I mean, when they see me getting excited about a potential storm threat or a snow threat, oh, even Rayo's going for it, Then they get excited. Then they say, oh my goodness, this may be something special, because even Joe Rayo is suggesting a significant snowfall on it. Remember, I'm also stressing it's still 8 days away. Things can change, but at least I'm putting that disclaimer in my noting that there may be something of interest later next week.
All right. Well, let's do a little Burler Jeopardy and wrap this up tonight. So I have one, and Uh, Scott sent this to me a couple of days ago, but we was busy with all the weather stuff that we just finally got to it tonight. Thank you, Mr. Briller, for putting this together. So it's the five biggest snowstorms in the month of February in New York City, Joe. The five
Ah,
biggest.
it's a funny thing. At the very beginning of the show tonight, I had mentioned the storm of '83, which at one time I think was third or fourth, and has now dropped. Uh,
Number five.
yeah, something like that.
Number five. PL on the chat board mentions 1978, and that was on February 5th through the 7th, 1978. 17.7 inches is number four. Number four.
Hard to
Now,
believe, isn't
now
it?
the next three, okay, are all in the 2000s.
Yeah, we had some
Okay,
really
which is why
wild.
I remind everybody that if you lived during that period from 2000 to 2020, it was
You had your fair share.
you had your fair share. It was the snow cycle that Joe and I never had when we were young. So I hope you appreciated it.
20,
Uh,
2010, 2010, we had count them, two 20-inch snowstorms. If you had told us that back in 1978 or 1983, 84, our eyes would have been rolling for 5 minutes hearing that because we wouldn't be able to imagine something like that happening.
yeah,
So, you folks, in the last 20, all of you people who have been complaining, being and moaning, so to speak. I won't use the term for the bee, but I mean, like, oh, we don't have winters anymore. You, you've been spoiled. You've been absolutely spoiled these last 20, 25 years with all the big storms that we have seen in and around our area.
Brandon Doherty hits the tip jar. Thanks, Brandon. How much snow do you have on the ground at the moment? And where in Delaware are you? I'd be very curious. Okay, so we've got number five and number four. Um, did anybody say? I'm trying to look. Two people. Jason Fox mentions 2003. So does Glenn Thompson. Steve
The the
Lapointe.
the, the President's Day storm, the President's Day 2 storm. Yeah,
Right, February 16th, 17th of 2003, 19.8 inches. So that's number three. Number two, let's see if anybody mentioned this particular year. Um, yes, John Menendez, uh, uh, 2010, and that was February 25th, 26th, 2010, 20.9
right.
on that one. And that leaves us with number one. And Patrick Darcy has mentions 2006. And I'm trying to see if anybody else mentions 2006. Nope, he's the only one. Might be somebody else, but if I'm scrolling by, so if I missed you, I'm sorry. But number one was February 11th, 12th, 2006, 26.9. Why do I not remember that one?
I don't, I don't even want to remember.
The thing about the 2000s and having worked, virtually all these big snowstorms is um, the fact that I was, worked them, you think I would remember them all. And probably once upon a time, I would have remembered them all. But every year that I get older, I lose more and more of my recollection of some of these events. I usually try to tie these things with something, that might have happened to me personally.
I remember
It,
2005. I think it was in January of 2005. There was a massive snowfall for New York, and it also coincided with the day that Johnny Carson passed away. That they announced that Johnny Carson. I remember fighting my way in through all the snow to get to News 12 Westchester. Again, it was on a Sunday, and hearing on the radio, "Oh, we have some very sad news. Johnny Carson just died." And I'm saying to myself, this would have been the main event. This would have been the major news story here in New York, but now it's going to have to share it with the death of what was once the living legend of comedy, Johnny Carson. So I seem to remember that storm. I remember it was something like 15 or 18 inches, but that was January, not February. So
Correct. One more thing before we wrap it up, because Mr. Tolerus did send me something else with regards to. Okay, so a few of you have been throwing this around, and you know, and I've also, on my subscription site, a few people have mentioned this to me. So I want to just kind of go over this. And Dave was very kind. This is his, he put this up on his feed on X. And people, what you refer to as a KU event, which is a Kosin Uccellini event. The guys who put together those Northeast snowstorm books that
yeah,
you probably have. I know I have mine. Um, term KU event refers to a particular type of significant and major historic East Coast snowstorm that may reach such intensity and coverage as to place itself within the Snowstorm Bible book, which was written by Paul Cosin and Dr. Louis Uccellini many years ago. The book has been updated a few times over the past 2 decades. The pattern evolution begins with a massive trough currently on the West Coast, moves into the Rockies, the Plains, the Midwest, and in the East over the next 7 days. The movement of this large scale long wave trough from the West Coast to the East Coast will generate at least two significant low pressure areas that will bring Midwest snowstorms. Okay, pay attention, folks. We've got tomorrow night and we've got Saturday. Snow to rain in the Ohio Valley and interior New England, and at least two significant, if not major, rain events along the East Coast and the Deep South. So that's what we're seeing here uh, as a prelude. At the same time this movement is occurring, the strong positive anomaly in also known as the Alaskan Ridge and the Greenland Block merge into a massive positively tilted anomaly centered across the Arctic region. This will eventually force the polar vortex to drop far to the south again, like it did in early and mid January. In addition, the Madden-Julian oscillation, currently in phase 7, or will be by February 12th, maintain its current intensity and move into phase 8. And it was, if you looked at the guidance today of the MJO that we did yesterday, we showed it. It goes into phase 8 from February 15th to the 21st, and then to phase 1 from February 22nd to 28th. Now, as of this morning on the GFS, it actually goes into phase 8 and stays there. This shows up on the extended weather models in the appearance of a 500 millibar pattern, taking up a textbook classic signature for a major East Coast snowstorm sometime around February 20th and 21st. No guarantees from the management, by the way. Of course, it is early, but given what the model data is showing, these maps, should they verify, should be saved and used in undergraduate meteorology programs throughout the country for those wishing to understand the evolution of teleconnections and the synoptic meteorology involving in detecting East Coast winter storm patterns. And he provides a graphic. And this is the European Madden-Julian oscillation. And it goes into, and I'm trying to follow, I always have a tough time figuring this out in terms of the dates. Okay, so trying to see where we are. So this is from, so this was from February 9th to the 25th. So in the neutral zone, comes out into phase 7, comes into phase 8, and then goes into phase 1 and 2. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Now I'm seeing it. It takes me a while to focus on these things. So you see where the red line is. Okay. So that's where, where we're headed here. We're we came out of 6, gone into 7 briefly. Now we're going to go out of 7 and into 8, and then eventually into 1 and probably 2. And this is the CFS, which is doing the same thing in 7, going into 8, then gradually into 1, and then into 2. By the time we get to March, we're in the phases 2 and 3. So we're going to be in these cold phases probably right through the middle part of March, uh, if you follow the MJO, and then you have how the upper air is set up, and and I showed the 500 before. I mean, this is you see troughing here in the east. You see the block sort of merging up with the Greenland block, covering central and northeastern Canada, and then troughing back to the west of that, down the Aleutians and down into Hawaii. I mean, this is, when we look at the European, for example, if I bring up the upper air, the hemispheric of the European, you're going to see it's very similar. Just let me roll this back. Let me make it a little smaller so I can squeeze the whole thing on the screen here. But, I'll roll it back and we can follow it along. So here you go. Um, there's your deep trough in the west, but you see the block, you see the merging of the Greenland block, and then the Alaskan ridge comes over the top and they just merge together. And then eventually you get the western trough to shift eastward, and then eventually the trough completely shifts into the eastern part of the United States right there. All right. So this would be Sunday, February 16th. So that's kind of getting into that window that they were talking about. And here it is again, right in there. It finally plays out sometime around the 20th or the 21st. So the pieces of the puzzle are here. The only question, the question becomes, Joe, does it how it comes together? You can have all the teleconnections you want and all that the oscillations are all, dancing in the streets and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, if the troughs are not in the right slot, in the right position, you can get a big development and wind up with a coast tugger. You can get a big development and wind up with a deep storm that goes up the east side of the Appalachians, and or you can get a big storm that affects the Atlantic and winds up going just far enough offshore. Those are the things that you have to deal with in the short range, and we're not even close to that yet. So, a little bit of a weather lesson for everybody, and we'll uh, we'll see where it goes from here. Did Brandon answer? Let me see if he answered me. I got to scroll back and find it. Uh, hold on. Uh, Brandon, did you put
For a
on
lot
the?
of schools next week, there will be a winter break coinciding with the President's Day holiday. So I can just see a lot of teachers, for example, saying, I could have had a couple of days off, but there were a big snowstorm. Why do we have to waste a big snowstorm during a time frame when we already have the days off? I mean, that's how the mentality of some may
I
be
know,
thinking.
but
So
tough toenails are hard to bite. I'm sorry, Brandon. I can't see the links don't show up on my end. Let me see. Let me try.
John Menendez, the window that I mentioned for the biggest storms or the biggest snows in the New York metropolitan area ran from February 3rd to February 17th, that 2 week interval. So what we're talking about is something that's just outside of the window, just beyond the 17th, but still, you want to play with a few days here or there. But this is you figure if there's any time for a big storm to affect us, this would be the approximate time for it to happen.
So, Brandon, this is your map. I assume is this your forecast map, or is this what actually fell on? Well, it hasn't fallen on the ground in Jersey yet, so I guess this is a forecast map. But I'm just wondering if you had any, um, actual numbers of what's fallen so far for you. I just would be curious as to how much you have on the ground. But anyway, let me switch that over there. And yeah, I know a number of you, by the way, thank you. Those of you who've been putting observations up on the chat board, thank you. I did see some of them, but I didn't get and, letting me know that it's snowing wherever you are in and around New York, New Jersey, or Long Island. It really
No,
does have.
what's wrong with you? You should if you want observation, just turn on Circuit A.
That's right. All right, so Brandon says he's had 2 inches where he is. Okay. Rich Rothmansky, thank you for the report. 1.5 miles of snow at Kennedy. It's nice to have the Kennedy Observer on the chat board while the show is going on. It is very helpful. 1.5 inches, Jason Fox in Wilmington, Delaware. Downstate more than 4+. Okay, that's downstate in Delaware more than 4+. Because northern Delaware and southern New Jersey, the snow really didn't get there until a couple of hours ago. So they're just getting going there.
Hey, can I ask
Uh,
just a question? Why is Reuben Fairchild in such a nasty, sour mood tonight? He's saying the guys over at WPC really blew it with their prediction like a week ago of a significant snowfall for the Mid-Atlantic. P.S. Delaware, the Delmarva, Washington, Baltimore, that's the Mid-Atlantic. And a lot of places have and will get 4, 5, 6, 7 inches of snow. So why is the forecast that was being posted for the Mid-Atlantic such a bad forecast? I think it turned out to be a fantastic forecast.
well, you know what? When you don't have anybody, when you don't have to worry about accountability. You can say whatever the hell you want. Um, I hope whatever it is you wind up doing for a living, Ruben, you do it perfectly because you're going to wind up having a boss that's going to expect beyond perfection, and then you'll know what it means to be told that your work isn't good enough. So anyway, just a little
On
father,
that happy note,
just a little grandfatherly advice. Yes, and on that happy note, let us move on, and we will be back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. So everybody stay safe. Enjoy the snow tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow. Nighty night.
good night, folks.